Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to talk to Erin about her Crust Bombora build. So we've shown this bike on the channel a few times, mostly in the live streams, but a lot of people have been kind of curious to see what the final product was going to be, and now it's completely done. So I was thinking, Erin, if you wanted to run through what we ended up putting on this build, or what you ended up putting on this build.
Sure. We'll go tip to tail. We have some SRAM Apex shifters on some Salsa cow chipper handlebars, which are drop bars, slightly flared. I have pretty narrow shoulders, so they're 42. Salsa stem, Cane Creek headset, the 10, obviously the Crust Bombora frame, some Ultra Dynamico Rose JFF tires, which are the middle range for them as far as suppleness. This front wheel is a WTB rim with a SRAM hub. Tim said that we will link specifics on any parts that I don't know the details on.
Yeah, down
below. I built this wheel, so I put all the spokes and the hub into the rim and then twisted them and tuned them to true the wheel. So that was a process. Disc brakes, I don't remember the specs on the rotors. Also, funny anecdote to slip in here, when I sent my dad a picture of the bicycle, he said, "What is that gizmo on your front wheel?" Because the last time he paid any attention to bicycles was probably like 50 years ago. One last thing on the brakes to note, it's interesting because the rear brake is flat mount and the front brake is post mount. Or do I have those backwards?
I think you're right. Again, my disc brake knowledge is so minimal that I think you're right, and I have to really look at them, and it's been explained to me like 3 times, but that information doesn't stick because I have one set of disc brakes that I haven't changed or messed with, but yeah.
Okay, so I think we got everything on the front end. Coming to the back, I have an aluminum seat post with a Brooks B17 cutout saddle, which is actually the saddle from my Surly. Yep, the rear wheel, which is a WTB rim with a WTB hub. Did not build that one. SRAM Apex rear derailleur.
Do you know what gear ratio you're running on there? Is that 11 to something or 10 to something?
I'm pretty sure it's 11 to something.
So it's 1x.
1x, yes, 1x. And the pedals are Crank Brothers flat pedals, the small size. They're the Stamp 2.
I was curious why you decided to go with the Crust Bombora. They're a smaller brand, they're harder to get. You had to wait a long time to get it, whereas like the local bike shops around here have a lot of for gravel bike builds, a lot of the Surleys, the All Cities, Salsas. You would have been able to get one of those even in this year of shortages and a complete build. So why did you decide just to order a Crust Bombora frame?
So I was gonna get a gravel bike, or I wanted a gravel bike, and looked into the options, had this whole like rethinking process of how I wanted to spend my money and how I wanted to be involved in the process. I have some, I don't know, insecurities and discomfort around riding by myself on the roads. I have some just general insecurities and discomfort with bicycles. And for me, one way I can often work through those things is by understanding how things work. I thought that if I was involved in building the bicycle, that my comfort level with it would increase. Like, it's not a direct connection necessarily, like riding on the roads. You certainly don't have to understand how a bicycle is built to be comfortable doing that, but that's just kind of how my psychology tends to work from being manually involved in various different processes in various other aspects of my life.
Yeah, and I think that there's also, I would think there's a satisfaction in doing something yourself. Obviously, a lot of times, you know, we have friends who can do stuff, who could build my bikes better than I can, but I still like to at least try. That's one of my personal things. I like to try and build, like I do on the live streams, build a neo retro bike, but then I still like having Otis or Yanda like come over and like check things and stuff like that. So a little bit about why you wanted to like be involved in the process of getting it together, but why the brand Crust when it's a more difficult aspect to get one of their bikes than it would be have to go on a dirty river and grab a Gorilla Monsoon or something, like that.
Well, I just started a new job today, but my previous job was working for a nonprofit that managed farmers markets. So I have a strong conviction and connection to how I consume products with my money and the people who make them. And so before I really started looking into this bike, I hadn't really thought about people being part of that equation. And so when I learned about Crust, that was certainly there, over the...
So there in what aspect? So what do you mean was there? Like spending your money on Crust, what's the benefit of spending your money on Crust versus buying a salsa?
Oh, well, there's people. Like Matt and Cheech are like, and Garrett are like the people behind Crust. Like you can't really... I'm not sure how many people would be buying a Crust bike who wouldn't associate like those three people with their purchase.
And so they're the three people who own and run the company?
Right. Yeah, Cheech and Matt own it. I think that Matt does primarily all of the bicycle design. Cheech is his wife, and she's gotten involved with the business, handling some of like a lot of the administrative things as well as some creative aspects. And then Garrett is sort of their all-purpose, like, fill in the gaps, get the shit done kind of guy.
So kind of having an idea who the people who run the company. It's not like a faceless truck.
Yeah. I mean, like, All City, beautiful bikes, really quality bikes. That would have been an easier option where I could have just bought a build. But, like, I think of All City and I don't think of a person. And I really like thinking about the people. The same thing is what motivated me to buy these tires. Definitely they have a cult following. I have no doubt that they're very high quality and, worth the money. Are there other high quality, worth the money tires out there that are functional in a similar way? 100%. I'm sure there are. Again, like the people behind that brand, Patrick and Ron, I know I'm talking about these people like they're my friends. They're not. But I think they could be.
So you know where your money's going.
Yeah.
You know what their, I can't think of the right word, their ethics or personality or whatever it might be. So you feel like you have a relationship to where your dollar is going.
Yeah. I mean, and reading like things on their website, watching other YouTube videos where they're talking about YouTubers are either talking about their products and the businesses or interviewing them on social media. Like these are people who really believe in the product they're putting out there. They're not putting it out there because they think it's going to sell well.
I do remember seeing an interview with Matt from Crust saying at some point that one of the reasons he started designing bikes is because he was designing what he wanted and he felt like it wasn't out there. So that's kind of a cool thing too, to hear the guy who directly built the bike, say something like that. So one thing I was curious, you talked a little bit about like why you wanted to be involved in the building process and how you felt like understanding your bike more, just all of that kind of stuff. But how do you feel it went going from, you don't have this is not condescending, you don't have a high level of understanding of all the different arrangements of bike parts and Shimano and blah, 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 and 1-by and 2-by. So getting into building your own bike, kind of going from just someone who rides bikes to being involved in the process. How did that feel? Would you recommend it?
I definitely learned a lot, and as I think is usual in learning a lot about something with this many parts and this many nuances, learned that there is a lot more to learn. And also things that other people can make look really easy, there is like a lot of muscle memory involved that makes it look easy. So a couple things, when we ran through the parts, there were a lot of things that I didn't know specifics on. So obviously if you have disc brakes, you need rotors. Do I know why I have the rotors I do? No. And I am blessed to have Tim and then other friends who know a lot about these things. To a certain extent, you can mimic that by having a conversation in your local bike shop. Certainly here in Akron, Dirty River will have that conversation with you and give you the best recommendation. As far as putting all of those things on, I would say that I probably accomplished that about 35% of what I intended to do. So Tim or Ben or Otis or Yanda would walk me through what needed to happen to put whatever part on. I would kind of give it a go. I either didn't have the right tool, I didn't have the strength, or I didn't have like that refined muscle memory to be able to do it. So then ultimately somebody else did it. Do I still think it was valuable? Absolutely.
And when someone else did it, for the record, you were trying to watch and learn.
Oh yeah. Certainly I never would have gotten those tires on those rims. Never. It would have never happened. There are things where like I realize in hindsight, if I had just tried a little harder, if I had like refined my technique by watching somebody else or asking different questions, I could have done it. I would have never gotten those tires on those rims.
What do you think about, but didn't you end up routing most of the cables yourself or with a little guidance and stuff like that?
Yeah, I put the shift cables on pretty much all by myself by watching some videos and Googling some things. I'm pretty proud of that.
This is one thing I've never had to deal with. When I've built my vintage bikes, the headset's usually already there. Like every bike I've bought has had a headset. So those are one of those things that it's kind of interesting. You're not going to do yourself because you're not going to buy a headset press to build one bike, and maybe down the road you might own another bike that you would put a headset in. So there's certain things that you're always going to go to the bike shop for, or
yeah. Another thing that they did was in selecting the stem. So I had borrowed Ben's Gorilla Monsoon last summer to get a feel for whether I liked a one by and also gravel riding in general. Figuring out like what size headset to get. I think that they used an online tool that basically looked at like the dimensions of Ben's bike and compared that to the dimensions of the Bombora and then kind of matched the appropriate headset to that. Like, to be perfectly honest, because there's so many variables, like otherwise picking a stem would be a complete shot in the dark in my opinion.
Yeah, there's some things that I'm like, I think there's nothing wrong with like totally want to being involved in the process and custom picking what you want on a bike. Like one, like you said, you're lucky you have some friends who steer you in the right direction, and two, you do have a little bit of an idea. But I think about that and like forever, like I just rode my same mountain bike and never thought about it. And then when I wanted to go faster on the road, I put smoother tires on it. You know what I mean? I didn't think about changing anything else. I didn't know you could change I could have dropped the bars or changed the bars. I didn't think about it. So it's one of those things where I think if you are a first timer buying a complete bike, if you don't have that relationship somewhere, might make sense. And then if something's making you uncomfortable, stem, saddle, seat height, it's worth then maybe changing it out. Those parts aren't very expensive. Because I think of like my rally it was someone else's bike, Otis's actually, but I built it up a certain way, liked it, and then as I slowly went to upgrade it, I was learning from the way the bike felt. But I would you recommend someone like build their own bike from frame up? I mean, what do you think? Like, is that a...
I think it depends on a couple of things. First of all, I would say like, I would wait until you like riding bicycles and you like bicycles.
Yeah.
And then, keeping in mind what you want that bicycle to do. I certainly don't think that you have to. Like, I don't think that it's like a badge of honor. If you have similar psychology, like I described for me, where that helped my comfort level with knowing what's going on here is going to increase my comfort level overall, like, think actually that it might be more productive to do it kind of the way that you have, where it's been like, oh, I need to tweak my rear derailleur, or like kind of getting to know those things on a more honed in basis. But if you are going to get a bicycle, have that relationship with a local bike shop to figure out like what that division of labor can be, so that you're not high and dry if you don't have the right tool and end up potentially needing to invest almost as many dollars in tools as you do in components.
And I think that's one thing I hate. I hate the idea of throwing good money after bad. So I hate getting something that doesn't work out. But it's really hard. If you really get into the bike thing, you might, like I just made a video, end up wanting more than one anyways.
Yeah.
And swapping stuff. If it's something you use all the time, like I save money on my bikes in a certain aspect because I really don't drive my car that much. But so I've never recommend anyone just like going to stuff totally blind, but you almost kind of have to if you don't know, you know what I mean? I wouldn't buy a Kmart bike, I wouldn't buy a Walmart bike. If you think you're going to ride a little bit, invest a little money, a lot can be upgraded. And there are frames that are more affordable that could be endlessly upgraded. Great steel frames like Fairdale and a lot of the brands make this kind of thing. And I didn't watch enough of the gearing setup on this bike. But one thing for me is like having learned 9-speed Shimano fairly well. I've got a number of their group sets and I've done the Neo retro builds and that's how the Rally was first built up. I've also realized it's just like cars have been in my life. When I had a 1985 that was my grandma's, I could fix everything. Like no problem. But like with bikes too, like once Otis helped me put the 11-speed group set I bought on it and I watched the way he routed cables on some of that stuff, I'm like, this isn't amateur mechanic stuff anymore. Like, yes, you could watch a bunch of YouTube videos and sit there and meticulously do it, and some people have that mentality, and I do to a level. But when I watch that, I'm like, this is someone who does it every day, and I would never have gotten it that right. I would have ended up going in and paying anyways. So there is that element to consider that, like, you know, if you are going all modern, even if you want to select your parts, it still might be worth paying the fees to have a, you know, shop put it together, or maybe order all those parts through the shop, so they're the ones who put it together for you. I wouldn't just. They're not as simple as they used to be.
Right. There is an option that there's no one currently active in the Akron area, but a lot of communities, particularly like larger, mid-sized to larger cities, have what are called like bike kitchens. But you can go, you pay a fee, whether it's a membership or a per hour fee. You can go use all the tools, and there's typically somebody there who will, who is familiar with all of the mechanics and can help walk you through what you need to do.
But yeah, so it depends on where you live. YouTube is an invaluable resource.
We've talked about a lot of things, and there are some things that I think we could talk about more.
Get some whole videos on some of these topics.
Yeah, so definitely let us know in the comments like what we talked about that piqued your interest that should maybe be a video on its own, or things that we didn't talk about that you want to hear more about. Obviously, we'll talk more about when I actually get to ride it, because I rode it around the parking lot for 1/10 of a mile so far.
Yeah, our weather is freezing rain, snow right now, so it's not ideal. On my own personal level, I'm just excited that Erin has a gravel bike packing bike, so I get to take her on some of the stuff that me and my other friends go and ride on and stuff like that, so we get to do that together because we've been pretty bike path oriented in most of our rides. So I'm kind of excited to go and do a little more exploring with Erin, and then maybe even some of our, you know, regular touring can become a little more of the bike packing style trips. Anyways, I think that's probably good for this video. We could leave it there, right?
Yep.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you in the next one.
Okay, bye.